Good morning. We begin today's class and we will talk about auteur theory in Hollywood. So, I am sure most of you remember we have done auteurism in France, and who was the originator of the auteur theory in France? Besson. Good. André Besson in France, Cahiers du Cinéma. And what was the idea all about? That the director is the captain of the ship, giving more power to the directors. That is the idea. So, key concepts in today's class would be auteurism and discussing it in the American context, how authors make use of mise-en-scène and what could be their signature style. Key people would be Andrew Sarris, who gave us the theory of auteurism in Hollywood for American cinema. Ranjit was telling me the other day he read up on Andrew Sarris a few days back, and he died in 2012. Okay, so please do look up on Andrew Sarris and Howard Hawks as an author, but I am not going into too much depth. I am going to particularly focus on Alfred Hitchcock's cinema. I had already asked you to come, having watched some of his major movies including Rope. So, how did the concept originate? I am giving you a brief historical overview. In 1910, the British magazine Bioscope identified some directors as special. So, we are talking about as early as in 1910. Remember, cinema is was still in its very early stages. It began in 1885, and 1910 Bioscope already identified some directors as a class apart. In Germany, the term Auteur film was used during the same period. Filmmaker and novelist, and this we have already talked about, Alexander Astreux, who coined the term camera pen. That means if camera is a pen, director is the author. Okay. So, this is the connection. Astreux wanted to raise the status of cinema from a working class form of entertainment to high art form. There are many people who regard cinema, okay, what is there in cinema? It is just a time pass affair. But people like Astreux and Besson and later on Pauline Kael and Andrew Sarris, they try to elevate the status of cinema from just a very lower mode of entertainment to high art. A word about Alexandre Astreux. Astreux's article La Camera Stylo, camera pen, stylo pen, 1948, called for a new language in filmmaking, and the upshot of which was that camera should be used the way authors use their pens. He posited that filmmakers should make more personal kinds of cinema, and this is something that you will find in the works of authors, personal kinds of cinema. And when Vimal, you are talking about new Hollywood cinema, they are all about personal cinema. We talked about Coppola the other day while discussing The Godfather. Personal filmmaking, something that reflects the personality of the filmmaker. We have already talked about Truffaut. I am just doing a quick recap and then lead you towards the major author that we are going to discuss, that is Hitchcock. So, we have referred to his 1954 essay, Truffaut's Une certaine tendance du cinéma français, a certain tendency in French cinema, where overarching principles are that mise-en-scène is crucial to the reading of cinema. We discussed mise-en-scène while talking about melodrama. Remember Douglas Sirk, how he would construct the scene, the mise-en-scène in such a way that it tells you, the use of color, the use of sets, actors that he would invariably cast. Rock Hudson was his favorite. Yeah, so that is mise-en-scène. Sound, music, cinematography, they all express a personal style. Another feature, the director's personal expression is key in distinguishing whether they should be called directors. So, there has to be a signature style. So, those are the principles as posited by Francois Truffaut. Now, what is mise-en-scène? Most of you are already familiar with, and soon I am going to show you a clipping and you have to identify mise-en-scène. Okay? So, mise-en-scène, crudely put, identifies set design and props, the way certain things are used. In rope, which is the major prop? If you have watched, yes?
Start of the rope, later it's the box.
Chest. Yeah. So, chest is the major prop, and rope, of course. Yeah. Lighting and shadow. How various directors make use of. Watch Martin Scorsese, see the way he uses lights. Acting, and how certain directors make actors act in a certain way. For Hitchcock, actors were not very important. What did he call them? Actors are all, the word, cattle. Okay. Hitchcock used the term very boldly, cattle, for actors. He said that they are all alike, it's me who controls the movie. Okay. Costume and makeup. Mise-en-scène, in other words, is understood by the use of costume, makeup, set design, props, lighting within a single scene, and explains how these elements contribute to the narrative. So, it is very important to understand mise-en-scène. Think of some of our own Indian directors, think the cinema of Satyajit Ray and how important mise-en-scène was in his films. Okay. A lady from an aristocratic household wearing bangles in Pather Panchali, this denotes something, whereas you are shown the wrist, the naked wrist of the lady from a poorer section of society and juxtaposed together. What does it mean? Shows the class difference. Okay, so that is a very good example of mise-en-scène. So, authors are different from metteur-en-scène. Metteur-en-scène are just those people who are hired to direct a movie. They are not authors. They put together a scene. Vimal, you know these things? Metteur-en-scène. Okay, so there is no personal style of a filmmaker. He is just, in other words, some person who puts together a scene. So, the distinction between auteur and metteur-en-scène was introduced by Caille's critics, and again I am repeating myself. According to these critics, an author should necessarily display a distinct sense of personal vision, a signature style, a subjective style. Andrew Sarris, 1928 to 2012, he was the leading American proponent, a critic of auteur theory, who wrote for the Village Voice. Village Voice is a magazine, is a kind of a very important newspaper. So, director is the sole author of his work, that is what he believed in. And this is regardless, and this is very bold now, this is very forward, this is regardless of the contribution the writers, producers or actors make. And new Hollywood, again we are gearing towards it. Now, next classes onwards we are going to start with a reading of new Hollywood cinema. So, I urge you to come having watched Bonnie and Clyde, Chinatown, American Graffiti by who? Good, George Lucas. Easy Rider, if possible watch Shampoo, Warren Beatty's. I do not know if it will be available. Shampoo, you wash your hair with shampoo. Okay. So, Andrew Sarris later ranked directors such as John Ford higher than someone like William Wyler. Okay, so that is Sarris's own opinion. For example, see, all these critics had major biases. For example, Pauline Kael was the one who made people like Warren Beatty, Robert Altman, and later on Martin Scorsese. She never liked Coppola though. Sarris's The American Cinema maps the history of the talking picture period up to 1968 into 11 categories of filmmakers with titles like Pantheon directors, strained seriousness and lightly likable. So, some are seriously likable and some are lightly likable. So, it is up to you if you want to agree or disagree with his list. And each category files directors' alphabetized names and filmographies with analysis of the distinctive personality or lack of personality of each director's body of work. Sarris is also known for constructing 3 concentric circle, and this is an auteur theory model, and outside on the outer circle you have technical competence followed by personal style, and at the core of each author is an interior meaning, a core thematic concern. So, that is the model Andrew Sarris proposes it, and it works. You know, technical competence, there has to be some kind of a style, technical style. Then personal style, it can even mean the kind of team you create for yourself, the kind of people you collaborate, because you are certain kind of a filmmaker, so you want to work with only these people. Douglas Sirk and Rock Hudson combination. Why did he want an extremely good looking actor for all his films? There must have been a reason. John Ford and John Wayne. Why did John Ford want only him? Howard Hawks and often Humphrey Bogart and Cary Grant. So, the hyper masculine actors of that particular age. And what was the interior meaning implicit in there? So, Andrew Sarris's choices, this is just an overview, and I want you to be familiar with the with some great works in international cinema. This is the list he gives in 1962. Ugetsu, you remember when we were doing Japanese cinema, we talked about Ugetsu, Tales of Ugetsu. Lola Montes, you are already familiar with. Who directed? Good, Max Ophuls. Règle de jeu, you have done. Who directed? Jean Renoir. L'Atlante, Jean Vigo. The Great Dictator, Chaplin. The Magnificent Ambersons, Shadow of a Doubt. Magnificent Ambersons, Orson Welles. Shadow of a Doubt, Hitchcock. Nuit and Buller, that is a French movie, and Tir sur la piano, Shoot the Piano Player by Truffaut. A Bout de Souffle by Godard. So, this is Andrew Sarris's definitive list of definitive movies, but then it is 62, and of course, you would not have some of the more contemporary filmmakers. But this is, I am often asked, tell us what to watch. So, this is how canons are created. Remember, we have already gone through the process of creation of a canon. So, this is a canonical list. If you want to understand cinema, go through this. See if the movies that you are doing, they have echoes of these films. It is important to understand. Now, problematizing the author. Again, I am quoting Sarris. Why is an author a problematic category? Because see, then what happens to someone as important as an actor? I mean, think Tamil cinema and think how our industry works. Yeah, even Bollywood, maybe things are changing of late, but they haven't always been like that. I mean, I can give you example from my personal experience. There was a time during the late 70s and 80s, anything starring Amitabh Bachchan would be a mega success regardless of the product, the quality of the product. So, people would just line up for any movie starring Amitabh Bachchan, and similar is the case down south. You have a particular star and people would go for that. So, what happens to this category called actor? Then how come we say that authors are so important, when actors are definitely the ones who draw in the audience? Cinematography, You often talk about Mani Ratnam and Rajiv Menon or Santosh Sivan collaboration. They are the ones who give vision, who implement the director's vision, who execute the director's vision. So, it is very important because they are the ones who focus on visual style, length, the movie, a depth of field. So, it is important to understand that why cinematographers are so important. Gordon Willis and Coppola, in spite of all their differences during the making of the first Godfather, he still went to him for the second part as well. So, cinematographers are as important if you think about it that way. Two exceptions, directors who are also cinematographers, Lars von Trier and David Lean. You are familiar with the works of von Trier, but what did David Lean make? Classics are not your strength. Passage to India, Lawrence of Arabia. Remember these films, okay? Oh yeah, okay. And writer, I mean, what does a writer do? Generally it's accepted that writers are at the bottom of the food chain and they are not at all important. Most controversial category because anyone has the right to interfere with a writer's work, especially directors, especially actors. Okay, they want to change a line, they can do that without a by your leave. So, film or screenplay or story is written, rewritten, renegotiated several times. So, what happens to the screenwriter? And then of course, you have composers, and there are legendary composers who have added inimitable touches to a film. For example, we have Coppola and Nina Ricci, we were talking about them the other day, Godfather. Nolan and Hans Zimmer, legendary partnership, and so is Sergio Leone and Ennio Morricone. Spielberg with John Williams. So, all these people make a movie, there is a very significant contribution which cannot be negated. Actor, cinematographer, writer, composer. So, then what happens to the author? So, this is a question that I am throwing open to you. There are no answers, as Kurosawa has already told us that there is no fixed truth. Now, a quick, I mean, we are doing so much of directors and authors, so and we didn't touch upon Howard Hawks at all. So, a quick look, a quick glimpse at Howard Hawks, one of the greatest, one of the most successful directors of all times, and then we will move on to Hitchcock. So, Howard Hawks started his career as an aviator in the First World War. He joined the film industry and did several jobs, including screenwriter, editor, assistant director, made 7 silent films for 20th Century Fox Productions. Who controlled Fox? Good, Zanuck. Major themes, ethics and professionalism. And I will give you a list of his all time great movies. Please do watch them whenever you have time. Focus on strong narratives. Most of his films deal with the theme of good versus evil. William Friedkin, we often talk about him, Exorcist and the French Connection, and he once met Howard Hawks, who was already in his 70s, and Howard Hawks gave him just one tip that in most American New Wave cinema, I don't find the good and evil. There should always be emphasis on the good versus evil. And one reason why all after the initial successes that most American New Wave directors met with, there was a time after, when they started just flopping. Most of their movies bombed, and the entire New Wave counterculture movement, it came to an end by the late 70s, early 80s. Okay. And after that, you have been talking about the resurgence of the new Hollywood period after the 90s, post 90s. Okay. So, that is another story altogether, but there was a time when stories focused only on good versus evil. Schwarzenegger, Stallone, there is an enemy, there is something. So, there is a strong, Hollywood cinema, conventional cinema always goes for the good versus evil narrative, and that is what Howard Hawks advised William Friedkin to do, and his plots always offered a strong closure in the tradition, in the great classic tradition of classic Hollywood cinema. Major films, Scarface, and this is another name you should be familiar with, Ben Hecht. Many regard him as the greatest screenwriter of all times. If you look up Sid Field's screenwriting or 4 great scripts, then you have to then you will come across Ben Hecht's name figuring very prominently in his works. Scarface, directed by Howard Hawks and produced by the great Howard Hughes, the aviator. However, the movie was so controversial that Hughes had to withdraw the movie from circulation for several years, and it was not available till Hughes' death in 1979. There must have been some censorship issues with it, and Hughes had to withdraw the movie. Some great movies by Howard Hawks: The Road to Glory, one of his earliest ventures; Bringing Up Baby, Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn; His Girl Friday, again with Cary Grant; The Big Sleep, based on Raymond Chandler's novel by the same title, starring Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall; Red River is a western, John Wayne and Monty Clift; Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Marilyn Monroe; and Rio Bravo, again with John Wayne. And Rio Bravo happens to be a favorite film of many of the new wave Hollywood filmmakers and also of Quentin Tarantino.